Sarah Lacey is running for Anne Arundel County Council, District 1. Sarah, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Joseph?
Thank you so much for accepting our interview. I appreciate you
having
coming
me.
on my program, my candidate interview program, and talking about the issues that matter most to people who are in Anne Arundel County. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, where is District 1? Because the Arundel Patriot covers a lot of stuff in the Annapolis area, but we are the Arundel Patriot, so we cover all of Anne Arundel County, and I don't even know where District 1 is, so please tell us where District 1 is.
I'm happy to. District 1, if you think of an analog clock and put your arm straight up, that straight up would be Linthicum, say. And to the right of you, 1 o'clock would be Brooklyn Park area. If you sweep from about the 1 o'clock all the way over to about the 7 o'clock, on the western edge of the county, that is
That's
District 1.
Okay, so what cities, what towns make that up?
Going in that direction, you've got Brooklyn Park, Linthicum, sweeps over and around the airport, and then down to Hanover, the western part of Severn, and Jessup.
So I'm assuming it's like D32 for Maryland House of Delegates, right?
District 1 is entirely in D32.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So for those of you who know where D32 is, so let's talk a little bit about your past.
Sure.
I want to just know about your experience, what you've been doing, and then why that led up to you eventually deciding to throw your hat into the race as Anne Arundel County Council.
Sure. Well, I have lived in Maryland for 16 years, in Anne Arundel County for about coming up on 2 years this summer. My family and I had been in Howard County for several years. And as we moved, it was a wonderful thing for our family, large family of 4 kids. We built a house in Anne Arundel County. It was something that we weren't going to be able to do in Howard County, and it was a childhood dream of mine to build my own house, so I was very excited to do that. Professionally, I'm an attorney, so when our homeowners association formed, when there were enough homeowners in the neighborhood, I think I ran for the board. I said, not it for being the president of the homeowners association, but I think because I'm an attorney and people respect that, and they know that that's a good good skill set to have on the homeowners association board.
Something on your resume,
they said, you get to be the president. I said, okay. Well, so as in that role, which I'm very happy to serve on the board, but as president, I thought, well, that person should be part of the more outward-facing element of the board. And so if there's a community problem that intersects with whether that's another community organization or a public office, that the president should take that on and try to coordinate, whoever these different players might be to solve the problem. And so you asked me, well, how did I get up to this point of running for office?
Throwing your hat in the race,
Throwing my hat in the race. So I'm challenging Pete Smith, who's a Democratic incumbent and not yet term limited. He has 4 more years. So people would say, well, why do that? Well, my why was because the neighborhood problem that we tried to solve, other parents in the neighborhood had tried to solve, still was not solved. And I felt that Pete's response was essentially not acceptable, not satisfactory, and so I thought he should be challenged in the primary, and I threw my hat in the ring.
Gotcha. So what was that exact problem that you and other parents experienced, and why do you think that he didn't I don't want to say do anything about it, but why do you think that his reaction to that was not satisfactory?
So the problem relates to getting a school bus into our neighborhood. As I mentioned, it's a new construction neighborhood, but all the houses are built. We're really in the very last stages of development. We have another neighborhood next to us that is in a much earlier stage of construction. And the way the school system decides to run a bus into a neighborhood, a new neighborhood, say, they have a policy, a regulation that has certain requirements. One of those requirements is that the road that leads to your neighborhood needs to be what's called a public road. It's dedicated to the public. The county is responsible for maintaining it, in our case. Okay. So our road that leads out to the main road will be public. However, it runs through this adjacent neighborhood, which
makes it not
is
public.
going to take it a while. Well, ours isn't public yet either. but it could be public sooner because we're farther along in the development process than the adjacent neighborhood. So in trying to advocate through the school system and through its Office of Transportation and then with the Board of Education, I've realized that there's a problem. Essentially, our neighborhood was approved as an island. We're an island in the county with no public road connection until the other neighborhood is done. And that means we could be waiting years and years because who knows when that developer will have finished its work.
Yeah. Right.
It's something completely beyond our neighborhood's control. And so a lot of other people in my neighborhood had already reached out to Pete Smith's office, given that our county councilman or councilwoman is at our first level elected representative.
Right.
Then they thought, well, the person in that office should try to help resolve this problem because it's a neighborhood problem. So Pete Smith was contacted by other people. Eventually I contacted him also, along with the other parents.
Were you able to speak to him directly?
So I never did speak to him directly. I sent him a lengthy email laying out the problem and pointing out that other parents had reached out to him. I didn't receive a response to that email. And then I went to the county council and I gave public testimony at the county council. And I laid out the case. I think you have 2 or 3 minutes to be able to explain what the problem is, so I did. And at the time, John Grasso was the chairman of the council, so he said, okay, well, Pete, since this is your district, you get the first crack at a response. And his answer was, we're familiar with this issue, but I think all you can do is lean on the developer to work faster, the developer of the other neighborhood. And some of the other council members seemed sympathetic, and they, along with everyone else that I've spoken to about this problem, felt that there should be some sort of answer. And overall, that makes sense. And as I reflected coming out of that meeting, which was one of their October meetings that I attended, I thought, okay, well, we've made the case. Let's give it some more time. And we were also working on a different angle of just seeing, okay, well, where are we really in the development process? Maybe they'll be done this spring. Well, the other neighborhood's not done this spring. So here we are going to come up on another school year, and we don't know if we'll get the school bus. And so right at the filing deadline, I had been thinking, well, do I think we're going to see anything more to solve this problem? And I decided I don't think so. So I'm going to run.
So why, if it's this issue, and we'll talk about a couple other issues as well that affect the county, but if it's this issue that really inspired you to run, what made you choose county council over Board of Education for this particular issue for bus route? What made you think that was going to be more important than choosing a Board of Education that would also be able to deal with the issue in more education related policy?
I do feel very strongly about education and education policy. 3 of my children are in school. I have 2 elementary schoolers and 1 rising 9th grader. So it's very important, but it doesn't cover the scope of what I felt were the problems that weren't being addressed. And those problems I saw as essentially a conflict between 2 systems that weren't integrated. They have separate boundaries, and each one is saying the other needs to do something. To me, that is a perfect example of an opportunity for a legislative solution, and it seemed clear to me that since the county council is responsible for approving the zoning changes and the development, then that's the place to start.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the other things that affect your district and how you plan to fix them. One of the biggest things that's affecting Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and the whole country right now is the opioid epidemic. So what would you do if elected councilwoman to District 1 to face that head on, to face that problem that we're seeing all throughout the county?
Sure. I think it is one of those problems that requires multiple prongs of attack to try to solve. One of the things that I have learned about the opioid crisis is that in other states where the use of medical marijuana is is not as restricted as it is here.
Here, right.
That the opioid prescriptions drop, the fatalities from overdoses drop, and that's something that I know that we have state legislation that says where our districts where the boundaries need to be for where we can have a medical marijuana dispensary in the county, but from what I have read, those restrictions are so restrictive that I don't think there's effective access. And that's something that, even though the county council may be more limited in what tools are available to it to address that piece,
Right.
I think the council still has a role in advocating with our state delegates and at that level within the government to say we can make the case for why these are better solutions that we want to work toward within whatever our scope of authority is.
Right.
So that's one thing. A second thing that I would like to do, I'd like to see the county council fund more mental health resources, not just for the schools. We've been hearing a lot about how can we add more resources within the schools to address mental health, especially of children. But I think we need to look at what we can do outside of schools, because it's within the general population. We know we have too few mental health resources, and that what resources we have are generally inaccessible to a lot of people. And what I think we should try to do, in the same way that I think the bus stop can be resolved in part by a legislative solution that says this is a practical problem of daily life that we can work on as a community, I think we can need to do the same things in addressing the opioid crisis. And as far as it affects District 1, I think that means that the county council can do more, both one in its role as the Board of Health for the county, and two, through funding for mental health treatment.
I want to get back to the point you just made that the bus stop, and this interview is not about the bus stop, but it's about what's going on with the bus stop, that it is a practical issue that needs a quick piece of legislation to get fixed. Why are things like this so hard to get done at a county level?
That is exactly my question. That's exactly why I'm running. And as I've gone, I didn't talk to people in other neighborhoods before I decided to run, but I did after I declared my candidacy, and I've gone through other neighborhoods where I've heard similar things from other people. Why is this so hard to get done? Here is a practical problem in my neighborhood, and the county government doesn't seem responsive to them. And I think, to be fair, I don't know all the details of those kinds of situations that people have told me about.
Right.
But I think if they're feeling dissatisfied, someone didn't communicate enough to them whatever was done. And people don't know. One thing is you can say, well, I went through this process to try to resolve your problem, and you maybe communicate that to one person, but you don't communicate it to the whole community, and you're not proactive about working with that community, then
Right.
whether or not you got a practical solution, people are going to feel disconnected.
Right.
And that's something I think is just a different way of approaching being the representative of your constituents.
What do you see as being one of the biggest problems? So we've already talked about opioids. We've talked about what inspired you to run and why you think that things don't get done at the county level. But what do you see as one of being another big problem aside of what we've already talked about that you're looking to get in there and fix
Sure.
if you win?
School funding is huge, and I think one of the things that District 1 especially needs is a new high school. Meade High School and North County High School are the only two high schools in District 1.
Yeah.
But District 1 has been growing rapidly from everything that I understand. I think it's the fastest growing district in the county, and that there hasn't been a new school built since North County, as far as I know. It's also a matter of practically the traffic. When I've been commuting essentially from Jessup up to Brooklyn Park Middle School, where my daughter was in the magnet program for art there for the past 2 years, and that trip up 295 and across the Beltway, you realize that going around the airport really does not make sense for a lot of people. It would be great to find a location, I think in Hanover, somewhere near the airport, where we put new schools so that some of that can be cut in half, in part because our kids shouldn't be stuck in traffic as long either. And I think it's just needed. We clearly need more school capacity, more classroom capacity, as well as teachers. I also will strongly support making sure that our teachers are paid fairly and commensurate with the importance of their job. From my understanding is they're very underpaid, and that there were many teachers who...
And in Anne Arundel County, they're required to have a master's degree to teach.
Yeah.
Which is expensive.
Exactly. So I think paying teachers is a huge priority, also paying our public safety personnel enough. I agree with many people who have said we shouldn't be just training people so that they then go on to another district. We've got to retain the people that we've trained. And I think it's also really important from a community perspective. It even ties back, in my mind, to opioids. Because if you have a stable group of people who care the most about the community, in my mind, they demonstrate it with their career choices, the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers, our emergency responders. They ought to be able to live here, to afford to live here and stay in the community.
Right.
Because they know people, they build relationships, and they become part of the integral fabric of our community.
So let's talk about, you said you also want to give more money to public servants in Anne Arundel County as well. The Anne Arundel County Police Department, rather large police department. How do you think they're doing? There was a question that was asked at the last candidate forum that I saw you at in Odenton about basically, I can't remember the exact question, but was what do you think of the Anne Arundel County Police Department? And one of the candidates who was up there, who is running for state senate, his name is escaping me right now, who was the president of the Anne Arundel County Council, who is now running. John Grasso. John Grasso. It's interesting to see how somebody who works for the county as a councilman, who's an elected official, talk about their police department versus somebody who's going into it as a citizen like you. So I want to know what you think about the Anne Arundel County Police Department, and if there is anything that you think that's going wrong with it per se, how that would get fixed under your administration.
Well, in representing, I guess it wouldn't really be an administration.
Right.
But I think as part of campaigning, I have taken the time to attend some community meetings where I can, and I have seen from a few of these meetings, especially ones they've had in Brooklyn Park. I know that the Northern District has a community officer, essentially, a police officer who comes to these meetings and gives the community updates on the criminal activity that has happened or has decreased in their neighborhoods, and giving them safety tips and those kinds of things. I've also had a limited interaction with a police detective in Anne Arundel County, and I thought a specific matter was handled professionally. So what I've seen myself has been professional. On the other hand, outside of this jurisdiction, my professional experience in Baltimore City as a civil rights attorney has been that you see more of the bad apples. And so I haven't heard as much about that in Anne Arundel County, and I think there are some important steps, like the body cameras that help hold everyone accountable, including the people who are recorded, like the citizens who are recorded, as well as the police. It's,
right, absolutely.
For everyone, I think things like body cameras are huge for public accountability. What I remember from that forum was the question was about whether you would support a citizen review board of the police department. And I answered, yes, I would support it. I think having some citizen accountability by being able to review things so it's not entirely internal affairs is an important step. I think any measure that increases public accountability and adds some, not really transparency per se, but allowing the public to know what's going on and
government
how
by the people
decisions
for the
are
people.
made. Right. I think that's important, and it helps everyone.
Absolutely. Sarah, how can people get in touch with your campaign, get a yard sign, volunteer, donate? Primary elections are right around the corner, so how can people learn a little bit more about you?
They're happening right now.
Yeah.
My website is www.votesaralacey.com. That's vote Sarah with an H, Lacey, Lacey.com. You can also call me, 443-620-4024. You won't see yard signs with my name on them unless I win the primary, I suppose. I might change my view, but I kind of think I'm one of those who thinks that's too much clutter and environmentally not responsible, so I don't do them. But you can contact me. I'd love to hear from you, answer any questions that you have, and if you want to vote for me, I hope you do.
She's the first candidate to give her phone number out, which shows her accountability. Absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for sitting down with us. And if you win, and you get through the general elections as well, we'd love to have you back on. I'd like to have you back on personally to talk about it, because we need to make sure that people who are winning are coming back to talk to the people, and not just while they're trying to campaign and get more votes.
Absolutely.
So
it's important.
We really appreciate it. Thank you again so
Thanks
much.
For the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Reporting here in Annapolis, my name is Joseph Omo for the Arundel Patriot.